almost anything, we invest in, in terms of that first check, not only there's no product market fit, there's also nothing more than one person sitting in the conference room with us, right? There wasn't even a single slide in any of those companies, right? So the very large rounds done, very competitive financings, but very high caliber people.
Welcome to Technoventure. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Asheem Chandna. Asheem is a general partner at Greylock Partners, one of the oldest venture capital firms, founded in 1965. Over 80% of the company's investments are the first check, pre-seed, seed, or Series A. Asheem joined the company in 2003, and he prides himself on being able to draw on experiences to relate equally to engineers, salespeople, and customers. And having known him for some time, I can say that among his many gifts is an ability to synthesize complex topics to make them more broadly understood and embraced. Asheem has been an early, if not the first investor in a remarkable set of companies, such as Palo Alto Networks, AppDynamics, Sumo Logic, Abnormal AI, Rubrik, Aruba Networks, Imperva, and Sky-High Networks, just to name a few. I'm pleased to welcome him to Technoventure. Asheem, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Peter. It's a privilege to be here, and thanks for that very kind introduction.
Oh, thank you so much. The honor is certainly mine. Well, maybe you can. I think many people who would be listening to this or watching this would know Greylock, but certainly they don't know as well as you do. And I wonder if you could take a quick moment and talk a bit about how where you as a firm focus and how you differentiate yourself in the venture capital industry.
Yeah, sure. So, so Greylock's one of the oldest firms in venture. We're actually going to be 60 years old later this year. The firm began, 60 years ago in 1965 in the Boston area. Today, we're, primarily a Bay Area-based firm. And as you mentioned, Peter, we're really focused on, what folks would call early stage venture investing. So, preferably in the very first round a company raises, today called the seed round, or, in the second round called the Series A. We will selectively do some later stage investments as well, but our primary focus is really on those early rounds and ideally be the first check, that a founder raises. I think what really differentiates us is, the analogy I like to use is like of building a house or building a building. It's hard to kind of build a skyscraper unless you get the foundation right. And just because you get the foundation right doesn't mean you will build a skyscraper. But if you don't have the foundation laid correctly, you won't have the opportunity to really build that skyscraper out. So what we really like to do is, work with entrepreneurs on day one, help them build the foundation of their company, help them build the foundation in a way that they actually do have the potential to build something very, very large, over the years. And so what that really comes down to is, picking the right starting point and the right strategy, and really thinking about that, being a core partner to the founder, to the founding team, on strategy, and being very particular on where one starts, what the insertion strategy is. The next piece is really recruiting. So, and a lot of folks would say, if you look at an early company, you look at the first 5, 10, 20 employees, that tells you a lot about the company and the company's potential, because that early set of employees, you want to keep the bar very, very high and attract a very high caliber team. And if you can really pull that off and do that correctly, then you've set yourself up for success, and you've set the culture and the bar in a particular way. And the flip, of course, if you mess all that up, it's very hard for you to kind of build a high caliber company. So it's really the strategy, then it's the recruiting of the early team. And then the other piece is, in particular in enterprise companies, very focused customer development. So these are some of the things that there is a little bit of a craft around, and these things take time to kind of work on, in a systematic way. And it is work that, we pride ourselves on doing. Our team is comprised of people that are interested in doing this work. And also what it means is, we tend to be much more selective in the number of investments we write every year. So we meet with thousands of companies every year, but, we're probably just funding maybe 10 to 15, companies at an early stage every year.
Fascinating. And you've already gotten into some of the substance of an area I wanted to talk about, which is by definition, you are often investing before product market fit has been established. And naturally, that's a very high risk, also potentially very high reward, but a high risk area to play in. And so how do you think about mitigating that risk? You've already started to talk about some of the factors that you think about, but I'd love to have you peel back the onion a little bit further to understand further how you think about that risk management.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I've now been at Greylock almost 22 years, and If you were to ask me, like, hey, what are a couple of the key lessons you've taken away? And I'm going to link that to the question you asked me. So only one thing I would say, we're the people business. So really our primary work, right, is like meeting with founders and then, trying to assess them and who they are and their potential looking forward, and then tying that to the true north of the company. So we're fundamentally investing in founders, certain attributes, and then tying it back to, the true north. And we're trying to be on the right side of change and then kind of, work, in a particular way. And yeah, so almost anything, we invest in, in terms of that first check, not only there's no product market fit, there's often nothing more than one person sitting in the conference room with us, right? Or maybe two or three people and a little bit of an idea or a team. And sometimes there's a few slides, sometimes there's no slides either, right? In fact, like I would say the last three companies I made, which were very competitive financings. Many venture firms wanted to, fund these individuals. Feel very privileged. The individuals chose to work with Greylock and me. There wasn't even a single slide in any of those companies, right? So the very large rounds done, very competitive financings, but very high caliber people, that are methodical thinkers, clear thinkers, and mission orientation, and then yeah.
So talk about the role that experience plays. So especially as you're thinking about an individual's ability to deliver upon an idea that may be brand new. In many cases, it is in fact the case. How much are you weighing what they've done previously and how successful they've been in prior efforts versus somebody who perhaps this is the first idea they've ever pursued, which may
Yeah.
be itself disqualifying. But I'd love your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say actually, it's much harder to assess people. It's not easy to assess markets of technology, as these things change. And there are a lot of unknowns. And certainly, we're in a very interesting time today overall, technology with a lot of uncertainty, right? But I would say it's actually much harder to assess people, or, assessing people is very, very hard. Now, the longer somebody's been in the workplace and the longer, they have an experience and a track record, so if somebody has a poor track record in the past and they have a history of not really delivering, I think most people would say, hey, I'm not going to take a bet on that person, especially in a core role as a founder or the CEO. And I think people will, largely be right. There are exceptions to that as well. Sometimes people perform poorly in certain situations, are not motivated, and something suddenly kicks into somebody and they can change. So that also does happen, but largely the more experience there is, right? Uh, and then, so I think, one is looking at experience, the longer one's been in the workplace, and then trying to assess for the journey ahead. And I'll come back to a little bit of what one's assessing for in a second as well. I think when somebody's younger and earlier in their career, it becomes much, much harder. And, I think one trend we are seeing, we are in the AI era today, and we are seeing founders be much, much younger. We are funding more college dropouts as well, or venture in general. A lot more companies are being funded by younger people that are dropping out of college to start these companies, and so then it becomes much much harder because people have really no work history, and so you're really assessing based on potential, right, and on interactions and on very limited kind of ability to look back. But I'll maybe just say one other thing and then I'll pause. Right, there are many definitions of a CEO. The one definition I like is that a CEO does three things. First is they figure out the strategy, or what are the right things to work on. The second is, recruiting. You get the right people into the right jobs, right? And the third is, make the trains run on time, or you've got to drive the right velocity and the right, tactics and the right frequency of things, right? There are many definitions. This is one definition. And so for a company starting out, right, it means you got to figure out the right things, back to the product market fit, get the early product market fit correct. You got to be able to recruit. It doesn't matter how smart I would be as a founder. If I can't recruit the right people around me that are stage appropriate, I'm not going to be able to build a company. And then the third thing, if I know the right things to do, I get smart people around me. If we can't execute with velocity today, right? We're not going to build a company. So that's one simplistic framework. Yeah.
What is it about the AI age that has you investing in founders that are on average younger than perhaps in the past? Is it a lack of adherence to shibboleths of ways of working that perhaps 30 or 40 something or beyond would have? Is it the fact they're immersed from an earlier age in the very topics that they're pursuing? What are some of the reasons behind that point you just made?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's a great question. I would say, we're currently in an era of very rapid change, right? And I think even if you look at where we are today, and if we were on the Zoom 1 year ago, or if you were on Zoom 1 year ago with, let's say, the best experts around the AI era, right? I think many people, it would be very hard to precisely say where we are 1 year today and where some of these building blocks sit. And we're again in a place today where our things are changing. And I think, in particular with coding tools and the advancement in codings and AI infrastructure, I think it's almost some of the knowledge of the way things have been built in the past is actually not helpful. So you almost want somebody with a clean sheet of paper where the history they has and the way of working in the past is actually not a helpful paradigm, and you almost want somebody who doesn't have that history and that paradigm.
Part of the advantage it would seem historically for somebody like yourself, of course, Ashim, is in fact that you've got history. You understand where
Yes.
it's repeating itself and perhaps where it is not. How do you personally make sure that you don't fall into the same sorts of potential
Yeah.
problems that you just described from the entrepreneurs of connecting dots in ways that they shouldn't be connected?
Yeah, it's a great thought and it's a challenge. And by the way, like I would say, venture capitalists also have spans, right? So I think the advantage of being an experienced venture capitalist, right? If someone to look at me or other venture capitalists, the advantage is that there's a lot of experience and knowledge, and there are common patterns across these companies that repeat themselves, and there's a lot of experience and battle scars that can be helpful. But I think also the way new companies are going to get built, there are many things that are inherently going to be very, very different. And I think quite candidly, like for somebody like myself, it also requires me to then be open and realize that hey, just because something was built successfully in the past in a particular company, it doesn't mean that the company of the future is going to be built that way. Quite the contrary, there are going to be many differences in the way the company of the future is going to be built, and one's got to kind of be very listen very carefully and allow one's nose to kind of take one there and not say hey, just because it was built successfully in the past this way means that's going to apply. In many cases it's not going to be the case.
Yeah, very interesting. I want to talk a bit about your background, if you don't mind,
Yes.
Ashim. You began your career in product architecture and product management roles in companies like Bell Labs, Synoptics, CompuWare, among some other
Right.
companies as well. At the outset of your career, what were your long-term goals? What did you think you were headed towards? I can't imagine it's where you are now, this remarkable, august
That's
position you
right.
have. What were you hoping to be on the path towards in the early days of your career?
Yeah, so in my case, I grew up in India, and as a teenager, I found myself interested in engineering and electrical engineering in particular. And so I didn't really know what a venture capitalist was probably until some point in my 30s, maybe my late 20s or my 30s. So I certainly didn't grow up, thinking I was going to be a venture capitalist or a board member or an investor. And I found myself interested in engineering. I came to the US as a foreign student and got a BS in electrical engineering, a master's in computer engineering, at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio. And then out of grad school, I was also very lucky. When I went to grad school, I went into networking. My timing was very computer networking. My timing was very good. It was kind of the early days of internet network, of TCP/IP networking, and just at the cusp of Cisco's earliest friend and companies like Synoptics. I was lucky to start at Bell Labs in New Jersey, got to work on some very interesting, problem areas around networking. I was also very lucky to come out to the Bay Area and join Synoptics Communications as a fast-growing networking company and got accidentally thrust into product management. Wasn't something that I planned. And then really, as you kind of alluded, have had two careers out of grad school, first in product management and marketing. and now, a significant tenure in as a venture capitalist. And in product management and marketing is also very lucky. I was at some very fast-growing companies. Did a startup company, and then right before I came to Greylock, I was fortunate to join Checkpoint Software in cybersecurity, and ran that journey from 10 million in sales to half a billion in sales as the head of product management and business development. And I also did ran marketing for some of those years. But my core pillar was product management and and alliances and business development. And so I learned a lot through that journey, just in terms of company building as an executive, and then got interested in writing checks into smaller companies. I was always entrepreneurially minded, and at some point also began to develop a side interest in investing. And that work while I was an executive at Checkpoint Software in the 10 mil to half a billion in sales of writing small checks on the side into smaller companies in Silicon Valley, and often the interest to write the first check into engineering friends that I had that had entrepreneurial interest. That kind of accidentally got me into venture capital in full time. And basically, what happened is I got into the cap tables of some interesting companies, and then a bunch of VCs, kind of approached me and said, hey, kid, you might be in the wrong business here. Looks like you're able to get into some interesting companies. And have you actually considered doing this other thing full time? And I actually hadn't, and I actually didn't have that interest because I really enjoyed, being a full time product person in a company. But then when I got done with the Checkpoint journey after being there for 6.5 years, I was trying to debate what to do next. And my natural course was go to another company, go to another startup as a product leader or the CEO. And, I kind of accidentally, kind of got into venture. And I came to Greylock because I liked the platform, I liked the people, I liked the values, I liked the, just, the interest in founding backers, the long-term orientation in terms of working with founders in a very systematic way. Yeah.
Very interesting indeed. I wonder, actually, you talked about product centric roles, product management, but also marketing. In some ways, the product roles in technical organizations make a lot of sense as a ladder that you would be climbing given your technical background academically. Talk a bit
Yeah.
about the pathway towards developing marketing expertise, which I know you draw upon tremendously in your current role and have for some time. What was that pivot like in order to take on those responsibilities and have the confidence to do so?
Yeah, so I'm the example of someone who never had the opportunity to go to business school, quite frankly, because I came as a foreign student, and got it was easier to get kind of a fellowship or scholarship for graduate school in engineering. That was not possible in business school, and so I continued on to kind of graduate school in engineering. Had a scholarship for that. I didn't have the money to pay for that, and then got into the workforce, and then essentially never looked back. And then, kind of as I was basically in product management, where there's also learning to do because from the engineering, but it was a small side step. Engineering was a good kind of building block into product management. You're right, marketing is kind of a little bit the next level. So it's really something I had to teach myself, quite frankly. And in my home office here, I still have some of the books I used to learn many years ago, and then I've got more recent books, of course, as well. But I really remember sitting as a young product manager many years ago at Synoptics Communications with the Philip Kotler books on marketing management. And it's still sitting here on my bookshelf from years ago, and really just sitting and reading those books and teaching myself the basics of marketing, right? And then just, books like another gentleman called Jack Rice on short books around positioning and just kind of the basics of that.
That autodidactic nature is really admirable and impressive, I must say, Ashim. I wanted to also ask a follow up on another detail you shared. I've often thought that the immigrant's journey is fundamentally entrepreneurial. It's taking a risk. It's doing so with optimism. It's hoping that there's a better outcome on the other end of this decision that you're making. And it's no surprise that a great number of great entrepreneurs are themselves immigrants. Perhaps they have a different kind of risk tolerance, among other things, that
Yeah.
are necessary in order to be successful as entrepreneurs. Can you talk a bit about the extent to which you have any sort of reflections on your own immigrant's journey and the way in which that's impacted the way in which you've thought about managing your career? Does it give you a different risk tolerance? Has it given you one, do you think?
Yeah, I think it has because like I think just simplistically speaking, like when you come to a foreign country, and often you come with nothing, right? Most immigrants come with very limited, either no resource or very limited resource, right, behind them. And then, I think this is what perhaps, it's a lot's written about this, but I don't think it's really fully appreciated about the US and the opportunity it can provide, right, and how merit oriented it is, right? And so I think when you come and you don't have your family close by, right, and also you have nothing and your back's against the wall, so you tend to kind of give it everything you have, if you will, right? And both in the way you work and then also in the hours you put in, right? So both, when I was an undergrad and in grad school, I mean, I kind of lived in the labs that I worked in on campus. I'd stay there late at night. And also my first job at Bell Labs many years ago now. And my early job, I mean, I just sat at the office and I just worked, right? We had nothing else to do. And I put in that extra effort, right? And then I think if you link it to entrepreneurs, right, these journeys are very, very hard journeys, right? So I think it's really underappreciated how hard the entrepreneurial journey is. And and even in companies that are rocket ships, right? How hard they are, how hard founders work, the personal toll it takes on these founders, right? And these are really journeys of high intensity where people are up against all the odds. They're really walking through walls. They're going to be told no many, many times. The intensity, people are obsessive, right? They're completely obsessive. These journeys consume them, right? And even then, many people will fail, right? Or most people will fail, right? But and also requires, the personal sacrifice it requires, the sacrifice families make, right? To allow these people to, have some sort of success. So yeah, there's nothing glamorous about these journeys, right? These are like special journeys that some people choose to take down to. Also, when you recruit people, you're typically recruiting people that are giving up safe jobs. That's the social and moral responsibility, one's taking on as a founder, right? Now you've got this team that's going to come and working with you, and you've got to, make sure the team does well, right? Yeah. In many ways, the immigrant, this is almost just an extension of the immigrant journey, right? And there are some parallels, which is why, some set of immigrants are able to continue on these journeys. And yeah, that's-
That's great. Thank you for those reflections. That's really
Yeah.
very interesting to hear your own perspectives on the advantages that provides for the kind of career that you've had, and by extension the careers that many people you invested in have had as well. Areas of focus for you at Greylock, Asheem, include enterprise more broadly speaking, cybersecurity and infrastructure software more specifically. I wonder if you could talk a bit about the categories that you spend the most time in, and maybe talk a bit about some of the opportunities that are most interesting from your perspective in those categories today.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for that framing. That's excellent framing. I would say I'll start somewhat high level and then be more specific. So I would say, like, if you were to ask a number of venture investors today or just observers in the AI era, like, what are a couple of key questions? I think one of the most important questions right now, which I don't think anybody fully knows the answer to, is where is software value going to accrue in the future? Right? And if you just think of these layers of enterprise software, and as you laid it out, there's infrastructure software, there's applications, there's cybersecurity. You could take these three as large buckets, and over time, where is value really going to accrue? Or to take it to another, dimension, is value going to, continue to accrue more on the LLMs and to vendors like OpenAI, Anthropic, open source, or is value going to kind of go more into applications, into vertical applications? Is there going to be more software and services components are going to go more into software and more into pure applications? So there's a lot of very interesting, I'd say somewhat simplistic questions where you could say, hey, isn't the answer to this very, very obvious? And how can it be something else than what's obvious? It's actually, there are some things that are not fully clear yet, right? And so that's kind of one thing which I think a lot of investors are trying to kind of figure out and, get an understanding of. I don't think anybody could really predicted how far LLMs have already come today if we were like, let's say in the Zoom 3 years ago, right? And the types of things that are possible today just with ChatGPT today, or with deep research, or with basic agentic workflows of coding tools, right? And then, are we today still in the first inning on those, or are we in a more advanced inning, right? And if we are in the first inning, what does that really mean for the higher layers of software and all these individual software franchises that are being built that enterprises are customers of today? So I think that there's just some top level framing that's actually has a lot of moving parts and some unknowns on it. That's kind of one piece. And I think everybody's trying to think through these every day, every week with different data points, right? So that's kind of one thing. Then just to be more specific at the next level, just to, maybe two, three things that I'm thematically very interested in. So the first piece is I would just say, we sit today, enterprises sit today as customers of a significant number of SaaS applications. I think most enterprises today would have dozens or low hundreds of SaaS applications that they're being served by. And these SaaS applications are basically, nothing more than siloed workflows sitting on basic databases. So they've got dozens or hundreds of these where they're individual data stores or data platforms serving up workflows. And in some cases, or in many cases, my personal view is that many of these applications shouldn't exist as separate applications. They're just small sets of features that have rolled out in a particular way. Capital is available to these companies. They sold them to customers. Customers bought them. And today's customers have a sprawl of these applications sitting there as individual silos. Technology and software just progressed in a particular way to where we are today. Now, I think if you look at where we are today, and if you take not a 1 or 2 year view, but let's say if you take a 5 to 10 year view going forward, I personally believe, one view of this future which might play out. So if you're on the Zoom in the 5 to 10 year view from here today, a view that may play out is today enterprises have these siloed applications, dozens or low hundreds of them. The view where we may be heading in the future, 5 to 10 year view, is a view where customers would have a more unified data platform. And instead of the data sitting siloed today across these apps, the data would all be into a data platform, right? And then there would be an entitlement layer on that data platform. And then there would be agentic workflows coming directly off that data platform. And the advantage of that, right, the significant advantage of that is the workflows will be reimagined. The workflows will be reimagined of a broader set of data that's proprietary to the customer. So instead of having an HR app that functions of HR data today, a CRM app that of CRM data, a help desk that's of help desk data, all that data would be in a combined data platform, and then you'll be able to do more powerful workflows that would go appropriately end to end and would go much further, driven with AI. So I personally do believe we're heading to some rendition of that world. But how we get from where we are today to that, it's not just going to be a forklift, and most enterprises can't forklift to that. And so that's, I'd say, one topic area that I'm very fascinated by and trying to understand, where's the venture opportunity, the next set of venture opportunities around that. Either in those next set of data platforms, those entitlement layers, or those agentic workflows and builders that are going to sit on top there. Another area is, have spent a lot of time in just infrastructure software broadly, as you pointed out. And within infrastructure software, then not surprisingly, continue to be interested in the next set of data platforms, next set of observability, and also just enabling AI infrastructure. So that's kind of, an infra. In cyber, there's a number of, new kind of bucket areas. We have a number of new companies, up and running. But I think, SecOps is going to continually be, kind of reimagined. We're in a very interesting company called 7AI in that space. I think SaaS security is early, but it's evolving and becoming a very important category. We're in a company called Obsidian Security, in that space. We have a couple of new Greylock companies that literally just launched in the last few weeks. One is called Fable around human risk. We have one called Cogent that launched around, vulnerability management. There's, of course, an abnormal security, which you touched on in the introduction, which is, a very important company began AI native before AI was, more popular. Uh, and then I would say apologies to, many other companies in our portfolio that are, very emblematic the future where it's headed. But I would say like kind of the top level question around, just where value accrues, then this whole thing about how software is going to get redone. I think data platforms, observability, cyber. Uh, and then I think, vertical applications are going to become more important than in the past. In the past, applications have all been horizontal, but verticals in many, many areas. And if I was just to call one area out, I would call out healthcare. Healthcare is, two-thirds of US GDP. I think healthcare is going to get completely reimagined, with software playing a much more important role. That's probably a good place to pause.
Yeah, and gosh, so much great content there. Really interesting ideas that you presented, Ashim. A couple of things come to mind that I'd love to double click on. You talked about how data platforms associated, for example, with human capital management or CRM or help desks, they have certain naturally some major players that one can certainly come up with a short list of some of the and companies you've invested in fact in the
Yeah,
past
definitely.
that have become leaders in those spaces that are going to be significantly disrupted potentially in the next 5 to 10 years, as you point out. Can you talk a bit about, you don't necessarily need to mention companies, though you're welcome to, but industries that you think are going to be impacted most as a result of some of the changes that you've described, as it is a pretty, revolutionary change that you're speaking about?
Yeah, and I think I think fundamentally, like I think this has implications for both infrastructure software and specifically data platform. Just to use that term broadly, which encompasses databases, data lakes, whatever variations people would pick, and it also fundamentally has implications for the applications that sit on top. uh, and I think it is very challenging. Like if I was a CIO today, if I understand that, if I see if I see where we're headed, but how you actually transition your organization to that, it is actually very, very challenging to do that. But naming the name of a CIO, right? CIO of a Fortune 50 company. I was talking to the gentleman yesterday, and what he told me he's doing is right in his organization. So he's of course going to keep the status quo running the way it is for now. He said he's investing in an open source based data platform. So he doesn't want to long term pay the tax for that data platform either. So investing in an open source data platform in his organization. And he told me in his case, he's put 25 developers to work on this data platform. He's slowly bringing data into that open source data platform. So he's running a side project inside his IT team, keeping status going, but investing in an open source data platform, and then has 25 developers sitting there, and having these developers start to talk to his business team, to his line of business, and start to rebuild workflows in an agentic way. So he's actually building the applications internally. And the reality is, to accomplish what he's doing today, he can't go and purchase anything fully, to do that. He could go, without naming any particular vendors, he could basically go into the cloud service providers or some large standalone data platform vendors and bring them in and then start using their tooling to do run on this journey. But he's chosen to go down the open source and build it all bespoke because he thinks, while the other approach may in the short to midterm give him a better, kind of advancement, he thinks he actually wants to experiment with this and see where this takes him. So I think there's a lot of merit to that. He's going to learn a lot.
That's extraordinary, and what an existential issue this is, as we talk about for some major players potentially.
Actually, yeah. I mean, one is he's going to advance himself, build something bespoke for his company, and then I think he's threatening his entire stack.
Incredible. That's really extraordinary. I also wanted to ask you, Ashim. I think it's fascinating. You invest in a lot of artificial intelligence based companies. AI, of course, is the hottest topic of late. If we take that as a broad category, it's also a source naturally of a tremendous amount of risk. And you're also investing in cybersecurity firms who are attempting to mitigate that risk. How do you think about just even in your own thought process as somebody who is investing in a variety of different lanes in both those very broad categories about the ability of the of cybersecurity innovation, if you will, being able to tackle some of the risk associated with advances in AI? Are you optimistic that the pace is going to keep up? How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and maybe I'll reframe it and tell me if this is an appropriate reframing. Is you're really asking about securing AI?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I'm a practitioner, every practitioner in the world, every CEO in the world today wants to roll out AI and take advantage of AI to build a better business, but it comes with risks. And so, how do you run that journey? There's probably between 2 to 3 dozen venture-backed companies in that space today, and there's also been some early acquisitions that have already happened. I've personally, and I think at Greylock, we've struggled to actually invest in some of these companies because it's very unclear whether some of these use cases are transient or they can actually be durable, right? And they're actually good. I can argue both sides of this, right? So the honest answer, I don't know, and time will tell, like whether we should have really been more aggressive in investing in this or not. But I think things are changing because, see, I think we're at a moment right now where people people want to deploy AI, but they're also afraid of, hey, is AI going to access my data? The biggest question people have is around data access. And are my employees going to access my data correctly? Or are employees going to expose my data inappropriately externally or put it into something that shouldn't have access to? Or will clients have access to data that shouldn't have access to? So it's really, data, I think, is the crux of it. And some people are trying to then segregate these applications. If it's an AI application, let me put a additional safeguard on it. I don't really know how this is all going to play out. I think it's actually, I don't think these barriers are going to stand up because I think, increasingly everything's going to have an AI engine in it. So I think entitlements do need to be thought through. And then, people still talk, of course, today about AI engines hallucinating, but I think they don't talk about it as much today as they talked about it 4 years ago. And so I think some of these things they're gonna inherently, get better. So yeah, so I don't actually know. And again, I feel for the organizations that are rolling these things out, for the CISOs out there, the CIOs, because they have to. So, and I think this year there is a decent amount of growth in some of this tooling. But I think all these companies combined today, my best guess would be it's most likely like even less than 100 million ARR. Maybe it's already generous. I'll take it up to 200. So it's not even a drop in a bucket. If you look at how much money spent in cybersecurity worldwide and how much, but yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you for sharing those perspectives. I wonder, how have you used artificial intelligence in your own business personally that have impacted your own workflows, if you will? What sort of insights are you deriving? How do you work differently today relative to 3 or 4 years ago? Now with further incorporation of some of the tools that you've invested in and just more broadly experimenting.
Yeah, so at a simplistic level, I mean, Chat GPT on my cell phone has become one of my most used applications on my phone, right? And also on, of course, my laptop and computer. And today I'd say both from a work scenario and also personal scenario, I just completely rely on it, right? So, I mean, if you were a company and I was about to talk to you today and I didn't know the company very well, it's very likely, even if 4 minutes before the call or 5 minutes before the call, I may prompt ChatGPT and get a quick summary. In the past, I've spent 15 minutes on the website, try to understand the website. I may still do that, but almost for sure, I'm going to poke at some questions on ChatGPT. Increasingly, I may do a deep research report with ChatGPT on the company, and it's amazing how much information I can get in a concise way, including on private companies, right? So it's just become invaluable for quickly, kind of coming up to speed on something in a quick, because I'm in a mode where I'm trying to learn new things every day. I'm going to meetings. I have to come up to speed very quickly. I'm trying to baseline myself. So it's become invaluable for that baselining. I mean, I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago, traveling around. You like to go to nice restaurants or in a city, want to tour the city. In the past, I had to go rely on the concierge at a fancy hotel. I still do that, But now I can just go to ChatGPT, right? And basically, and the accuracy of the information I'm able to get, it's incredible. Same thing. I would say the other thing is, in venture, right? I mean, all this stuff is of course going to impact the venture capitalists and the way we work, right? And if you look at the way we work, there is some sequencing in the way we work, right? So, first part of the way we work is we have to source, right? If smart people are starting companies, we need to source those people. We need to make sure we intersect those people. If we can't do that, we're dead basically, right? Because the lifeblood of our business is meeting smart founders, meeting the best founders of tomorrow, getting the privilege of meeting them, hopefully decisioning correctly on those meetings, right? So, we use a lot of signals. There are social signals around the web to try to understand who the potential founders are of tomorrow. Also, when we see founders that have left companies, very quickly understanding, being able to zoom in on who we believe the smartest people are. And actually this is far from perfect, right? But there are certain things that take us into particular zones, and then we get some things right off we get some things wrong, we miss some things. But I think AI is increasingly going to play a role in helping venture capitalists source founders. Then I think in meetings, right? When we sit in meetings, there are certain filters. I think if you went with the same founder to 10 different VC offices, you're going to find some commonality of meetings. I think over time, AI and AI engines are going to listen into these meetings. And, it's possible, you have the AI is going to have a virtual seat at the table. And maybe over time, that voice, maybe the most important voice, or maybe that voice will have a full vote, right? Today, we're not quite there on that dimension. I think on sourcing, there's a lot going on across multiple venture firms. I think this next dimension, I think when you take it further, will there be a virtual board member? You could argue some of these skills, like why can't you train the AI engine? And again, you may not fully rely on that, but maybe, I mean, I've looked back to certain board meetings I've been in over the years, and significant mistakes were made. And I've sometimes asked myself the question, such a smart board sitting around the table, and yet nobody brought up this one question that turned out later to be very important. And how could that have been? And then maybe in the future, if AI was sitting there, AI would have asked that question, right? Hey guys, have you thought about this question, right? So I think it's fascinating where we're headed, right? And we are still early in this, but it definitely, I do believe, like AI will play a larger role.
You referenced the agentic age of AI, which is certainly upon
Yes.
us, and a lot of companies that are now delving more firmly into the leveraging of agents
Yeah.
and giving artificial intelligence thus agency in making decisions. Talk a bit about some of what you see as the most compelling and interesting use cases that are developing around that, especially relevant for CIOs, DOs, TOs of major scaled organizations.
What most people would say today, right? There are two use cases that have begun to play out at a certain level, right? The first would be around coding, right? And helping, both democratizing it and also advancing it in terms of overall productivity. And maybe I should say the reverse, adding productivity and then also further democratizing it. So that's the first piece, which is on coding. And then the second piece would be just on customer support broadly, right? And we are in the era of conversational AI, where AI can listen to conversations, whether it's voice conversations or it's text conversations or messages, and then AI engines can help with a lot of that, right? In terms of advancing that and help get to resolutions. So I would say, broadly speaking, both coding and then also AI in particular applied to customer support. I think these are these are two very good use cases for agentic and agentic workflows. But I think across that, I personally believe, like, literally every workflow one has, because workflows have been built today with certain types of technology engines that existed under the hoods, and now fundamentally the engine is capable of a lot more. So then the workflow should be reimagined, and I think the workflow will also be reimagined multimodal, right? So not just text, but text and voice and images and other things, all kind of, brought together, right? In multimodal, and you have a mix of modality in future workflows as well. So it's almost like, and this is why, like, in many ways, it actually helps not to have a knowledge of the prior workflows even, right? It's almost like somebody needs to just experience the problem and say, hey, why don't I solve the problem in a completely, this way makes complete sense to me, and let's not have knowledge of where it was solved previously in a very constrained way, but like reimagine it, bring in different modality. And then, of course, in cybersecurity, right? Cybersecurity is almost like the perfect bucket for a lot of this, right? And you take something like security operations, right? Where people are trying to take, different situations, set up incidents, try to respond to them, triage them, automate them, drive them to conclusion. It's the perfect domain, to be advanced, with agentic workflows. It's also worth noting, right? I think with cyber, what lies ahead, simplistically speaking, is it's really going to be a fight of bad AI versus good AI, because all the, AI is also going to make it easier. It's also going to democratize hacking and make hacking more productive, make it more sophisticated as well. So, and today, if humans are fighting software, or humans are fighting humans, if the bad guys are going to leverage advanced AI, there's no way humans will be able to, fight advanced software against them. So the next realm of this in cyber is really going to be bad AI software, fighting more sophisticated good AI software, or something like that. But humans won't stand a chance if it's humans fighting, more advanced bad software.
Very interesting. Well, Greylock certainly has a tremendous number of great resources. One can find at greylock.com, blogs, podcasts, and the like. I wonder if here at the close of our conversation, Asheem, are there other resources that you would recommend to our viewers and listeners to remain current on the topics that we're talking about today? What do you leverage? What are books, podcasts, other forms of media that you regularly pay attention to in order to stay informed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I don't think there's an easy answer, because so many things are moving so fast, and information is also, it's becoming more available, but it's much more spread out in terms of where true insights lie. I mean, what I continue to find the most useful is just, having the opportunity to talk to really smart people every week. And I learn from talking to people that are on the cusp of different things, that I reflect on what people tell me, and I try to triangulate and then synthesize it together. Uh, but then just to add to that, if I was to maybe point to a couple of media sources or whatever, right? I would say I do like reading something called Ben's Bites, BEN apostrophe Ben's Bites. It's almost the new hacker news for those that are familiar with hacker news. It's a small website, and every day they publish articles on AI. They also have a daily newsletter around that. So I find that quite as one kind of a way to just kind of keep up with AI and some new things. They do a pretty good job of tracking a number of things, and so that's one thing I do recommend to people to look at. The other piece I would say, just more broadly, is it's been fascinating to watch YouTube just broadly in terms of where YouTube was in the past and where it's come today and where it's headed. I think YouTube has really become very, very important, and a lot of important sources of knowledge are showing up there, including your podcast. I know your podcast is on YouTube as well, and you've been on there for many years, right? So I just think you can go to YouTube and type almost any topic, and you're going to find many sources of knowledge on YouTube, right? And excellent interviews on almost any topic you look at. So I increasingly find myself going to YouTube and just typing something and then searching, and then looking there and finding things to watch. It's a great way to educate myself, different things, whether it's a lecture by a professor, a graduate student, a founder, a marketeer. Yeah, so yeah.
Well, Asheem, certainly people who search YouTube or podcasts and find this one, they will learn mightily from the great insights that you've shared today. Thank you so much for being so generous with your insights, your perspectives, telling us a bit about where you see the future going, where you're investing, and why. It's been, as always, a great conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me, Peter. It's a privilege and pleasure. Yeah, thank you.